The small church stood quietly at the end of Maple Street. Morning sunlight passed through the colored glass windows, painting the wooden floor with soft shades of blue and red. Inside, people were praying, their voices low and peaceful. Among them sat a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Her name was Emily. She wore a simple white dress that was a little too big for her. Her brown hair was tied in 2 small ponytails, and her shoes looked old, almost falling apart. But none of that mattered to her. Her tiny hands were joined tightly, eyes closed. Her lips moved softly. No one around her could hear what she was saying, but she wasn't praying for toys or candy like other children her age might. She was praying for something much deeper. "God," she whispered, "I just want a dad." The words came out shaky, almost breaking. Her mother had passed away when Emily was just a baby. Since then, she had been living in an orphanage. The nuns were kind, but every night she saw other children get adopted. Each time someone came to visit, Emily would run to the door, hoping it was her turn. But they always walked past her. Today, she decided to pray differently. Not at the orphanage, but in a real church. She had heard that God listens more closely when you pray inside his house. She believed it with all her heart. At the very back of the church, sitting quietly in the last pew, was a man. David Miller, a man in his 50s. He was the kind of person whose name appeared in magazines and business papers. A millionaire CEO of a famous company. People called him a self-made man, but few knew how lonely he was. David had everything: cars, houses, power, but no family. His wife had left him years ago, unable to handle his long working hours. They had lost their only son in an accident 5 years ago. Since then, David stopped going to church, stopped talking to people, and buried himself in work. That morning, something strange had happened. He was driving past Maple Street when his car broke down near the church. Frustrated, he stepped out to make a call, but then he heard the church bell ring. For some reason, he walked inside. Maybe he just needed silence. Maybe it was fate. As he sat there waiting for the mechanic, he noticed the little girl in the front row. Her small voice, her trembling hands, something about her felt different. He couldn't hear her words clearly, but he saw tears on her face. When the priest ended the prayer, people began to leave. Emily stayed behind, still whispering something to the cross. David felt a strange pull in his heart. He stood up, walked slowly toward the front, and sat on the bench behind her. For a moment, he just watched her pray. Then softly he asked, "What are you praying for?" Emily turned around, her eyes red, but full of hope. "I'm asking God for a dad," she said simply. David froze. The words hit him like a storm. For years, he had avoided thinking about being a father. Now, out of nowhere, a little girl was asking God for the one thing he had lost: family. He didn't know what to say. He smiled weakly, nodded, and stood up. "That's a beautiful prayer," he said quietly, and walked out of the church. But as he stepped outside, his heart felt heavy. He looked back once more. Emily was still kneeling, still praying. The mechanic called him, saying the car was ready. David nodded, but his mind was somewhere else. As he drove away, he couldn't forget her words echoing in his head. "God, I just want a dad." That single sentence followed him all day, to his office, to his meetings, even into his dreams that night, and he didn't know it yet. But that one prayer was about to change both of their lives forever. Asterisk. The night after David Miller heard that little girl's prayer, he couldn't sleep. He lay in his big empty house, surrounded by silence. The ticking of the wall clock felt louder than usual. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her small face, those innocent eyes looking up toward heaven. "God, I just want a dad." The words echoed again and again in his mind. He tried to distract himself. He opened his laptop, checked his company reports, replied to a few emails, but nothing helped. For the first time in years, work didn't make him feel better. He got up, walked to his son's old room, and turned on the light. The room was untouched since the accident, the football trophy, the toy car on the shelf, the drawing on the wall that said "Best Dad Ever." David's throat tightened. His son Ryan had been almost the same age as that little girl when he died. He closed the door slowly and sat down, his heart heavy. It was as if life had given him another chance, but he didn't know what to do with it. The next morning, David drove to his office. The world outside moved fast, people rushing, phones ringing, deals being made. But his mind was still stuck in that quiet church. He called his assistant. "Hey, do you know a church on Maple Street?" "Yes, sir. St. Mary's Church," she replied. "Find out if they have an orphanage connected to them." His assistant was confused. "An orphanage, sir?" "Yes," David said firmly. "I need that information today." Later that afternoon, David parked his car in front of St. Mary's again. He didn't really plan what to say or do, he just felt he had to go back. Inside, the church was almost empty, just a few candles burning. The old priest looked up and smiled gently. "Good afternoon, Mr. Miller," he said. "It's been a long time since I've seen you here." David nodded awkwardly. "Father, there was a little girl here yesterday. She was sitting in the front row, praying alone." Oh. The priest thought for a moment. "Ah, that must be Emily," he said kindly. "She comes here often. Sweet child. She's from the orphanage we support." "Orphanage?" David repeated, his voice softer. "Yes. St. Mary's Home for Children. It's just down the street." David hesitated for a moment. "Would it be possible to meet her?" The priest smiled. "Of course. But please understand, many people visit. The children get attached easily." David nodded. "I understand." 10 minutes later, David walked into the small orphanage building. It smelled like old paint and soap, but it was clean and warm. Children were playing in the yard, laughing. For a moment, he just watched them. Their joy felt so pure, so simple. Then he saw her. Emily. She was sitting under a tree, drawing something on a piece of paper. He walked closer. She looked up, surprised, and her eyes widened. "You're the man from the church." David smiled. "Yes, I wanted to see you again." "May I sit?" She nodded shyly. He looked at her drawing. It was a picture of a little girl holding hands with a man. The man had a suit and a smile. "That's you?" he asked softly. She nodded. "That's me and my dad. I don't have one yet, but I draw him every day so God knows what he looks like." David's heart broke a little at her words. He didn't know what to say. For a long time, they just sat in silence, the wind moving gently through the trees. Finally, he asked, "Do you believe God will send you a dad?" Emily smiled. "Yes, maybe not today, but he listens. He always does." David looked at her, this small, brave soul who had more faith than he ever did. Before he left, she handed him the drawing. "You can keep it," she said. "So you remember to pray too?" David took the paper carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you, Emily," he said softly. As he drove away, he looked at the drawing on the seat beside him. A man and a little girl holding hands. He whispered to himself, "Maybe God wants me to remember how that feels." And for the first time in years, David smiled. But what he didn't know was that one simple visit would soon turn into something much bigger than he could ever imagine. The morning sun touched the windows of St. Mary's Orphanage, and the sound of children laughing filled the air. Emily was playing outside with the other kids, her small hands holding a red paper kite. She laughed when it flew high, her joy as bright as the sky itself. From across the street, inside a black car, David Miller watched quietly. He didn't know why he came back again. Maybe it was the way Emily's smile reminded him of his son. Maybe it was the peace he felt when he saw her happy. Whatever it was, he couldn't stay away. He had visited the orphanage office earlier that morning, pretending to be a businessman who wanted to make a donation. The caretaker, Sister Mary, welcomed him warmly. "We don't get many visitors like you, Mr. Miller," she said kindly. David smiled. Children deserve care. They deserve a chance. He didn't mention Emily, though his eyes kept glancing toward the playground where she played. That afternoon, David went back to his office, but his thoughts stayed at the orphanage. He opened his laptop and sent a message to his financial manager. Set up a charity fund for St. Mary's Orphanage. Anonymous donor. His assistant asked, "Anonymous, sir?" "Yes," David said quietly. No one needs to know. He didn't want fame. He just wanted to help. He arranged for better food, new clothes, and toys to be sent to the children. The orphanage suddenly began to receive support they had never seen before. The staff was surprised but grateful. The children were happier. And Emily, she finally got a new pair of shoes that fit her perfectly. A few days later, David returned again, this time openly. He brought art supplies and books. When Emily saw him, her eyes lit up. "You came back." David smiled. "Did. I brought some things for all of you." The children gathered around excitedly. He handed out sketchbooks, crayons, and puzzles. Emily looked at the colorful crayons like they were treasures. "Thank you," she said with a wide smile. David laughed softly. "You're welcome, Emily." They sat together again under the same tree. Emily started drawing right away. "What are you drawing today?" he asked. She giggled. "A family having breakfast. I saw a picture of it in a magazine once." David looked at the drawing, a table, plates, a smiling girl, and two parents. He felt something twist inside him. He said quietly, "That's beautiful." Emily looked up. "Do you eat breakfast with your family?" He paused. "No, not anymore." Her face turned gentle. "Then maybe you can come eat with us someday. We don't have much, but we share." David smiled faintly, his eyes misty. "Maybe I will." From that day, David became a quiet visitor at the orphanage. He didn't come every day, but whenever he did, Emily was always there waiting with a new story, a new drawing, or a question about the world. He fixed the broken swing. He donated new books for their small library. And sometimes, when the children were asleep, he stayed late helping Sister Mary repair old furniture. The staff began to notice how close David and Emily had become. Sister Mary saw the change in both of them. The little girl who once cried herself to sleep now laughed again. And the man who once lived in silence now smiled freely. One evening, when Emily was showing him her new drawing, a man helping a little girl fix a swing, Sister Mary walked up to them. "She talks about you all the time," she said softly. "You remind her of the father she prays for."
Oh.
David didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the drawing. Later, as he walked back to his car, he stopped near the church. He went inside, sat in the same pew where he had once seen Emily pray. For the first time in years, he prayed too. "God, I don't know what you're doing, but if this is your way of giving me a second chance, I'll take it." The candles flickered softly. The silence felt peaceful. Outside, the wind carried the laughter of children, and among those voices was one that made his heart feel alive again, Emily's. But David had no idea that fate was already planning something unexpected, something that would soon test both their hearts, in ways they never imagined. Weeks passed, and life at St. Mary's Orphanage started to feel brighter. The children laughed more, the rooms looked cleaner, and the sound of happiness filled the hallways. No one really knew who was helping behind the scenes, but Sister Mary had a strong feeling. She often caught David looking at Emily the way a father looks at his child. Every visit, David brought something new: books, food, blankets, or toys. But more than gifts, he brought peace. Emily had grown close to him. She called him Mr. David, and whenever she saw his car, she ran toward it with a smile that melted his heart. Still, David kept his feelings quiet. He didn't want to confuse her or make promises he wasn't ready for. He told himself he was only helping just a friend to the orphanage. But deep inside, he knew it was more than that. One cold morning, as rain poured over the city, David arrived at the orphanage with hot food for the children. But something felt wrong. The usual laughter was missing. The playground was empty. Inside, he found Sister Mary looking worried. "Father, what happened?" he asked quickly. "It's Emily," she said softly. "She's sick. High fever since last night. The doctor said it might be pneumonia." David's heart dropped. "Where is she?" "She's resting in her room. We're trying our best." Without another word, David rushed upstairs. Emily lay on a small bed, her face pale, her breathing weak. The drawing she made yesterday was still beside her pillow, a picture of her and David. Standing in front of a house with a big garden, David sat beside her and held her small hand gently. "Hey, sunshine," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." Emily opened her eyes slowly. "Mr. David, I feel so cold." He covered her with another blanket and brushed her hair softly. "Don't worry. I'll make sure you get better." Tears burned in his eyes. It felt like losing his son all over again. The same fear, the same helplessness. He couldn't let it happen again. "Call the best doctor in the city," he told Sister Mary. "I'll pay for everything." "Mr. Miller, that's not necessary." "It is necessary," he said firmly. Within an hour, a private doctor arrived, checking Emily carefully. David stood nearby, tense and silent. The doctor nodded slowly. "She needs hospital care for a few days. She's weak, but she'll recover." Relief washed over him. At the hospital, David stayed by her side every day. He canceled meetings, postponed business trips, something his employees had never seen before. The media started asking questions. Why is the famous CEO spending time in a children's hospital? But David didn't care. One night, as he sat by Emily's bed, she opened her eyes again. "Mr. David," she whispered weakly, "do you think God forgot my prayer?" He held her hand tighter. "No, Emily, God never forgets." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe you're the answer." David's breath caught. He wanted to say yes, wanted to tell her he'd be her dad, protect her, never leave her. But he stopped himself. She deserved more than promises made in a moment of emotion, so he said softly, "Get better first. Then we'll talk about prayers." A few days later, Emily began to recover. Her smile returned, and the color came back to her cheeks. Everyone at the orphanage was relieved. But on the day she returned, Sister Mary called David into her office. "Mr. Miller," she said, her tone careful, "a couple visited yesterday. They want to adopt Emily." David froze. "What? They're a kind couple. Stable, good people." "Emily doesn't know yet. The process will take a few weeks." His chest tightened. He forced a smile. "That's good. She deserves a family." But inside, it felt like the ground had fallen from under him that night. He sat in his car outside the orphanage, watching the lights go out one by one. Emily's window was glowing faintly. He could see her tiny shadow moving around, maybe praying again, maybe dreaming. And David whispered to himself, "God, what am I supposed to do now?" Because for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of losing someone he had just found. The next morning, David woke up with a heaviness in his chest. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's smile, the way she ran to him, the way she called him Mr. David with so much warmth. Now the thought of her leaving with another family felt like someone pulling away a piece of his heart. He sat by the window, staring at the sunrise. For years, he had lived without love, without family, convincing himself that he didn't need it anymore. But Emily had changed everything. She made him remember what it felt like to care again, to hope again. Still, he didn't know what was right. She deserved a happy home, not the loneliness of a man still healing from his past. Later that day, David drove to the orphanage. His hands were trembling slightly on the steering wheel. When he entered the gate, he saw Emily sitting under the same tree, drawing as always. When she spotted him, her face lit up. "Mr. David, look," she shouted, running toward him with her sketchbook. He smiled, pretending to be calm. "What did you draw this time?" She opened the page proudly. It showed 3 people, a man, a woman, and a little girl, standing in front of a small house with flowers around it. "That's me," Emily said happily. "And that's my new family. Sister Mary told me they want to meet me." David's heart twisted. "They seem nice," he said softly, forcing a smile. "They are," she said. "They're coming next week. But I'll miss you." Her voice dropped at the end, and for a moment, David saw tears forming in her eyes. He bent down, brushing her hair gently. "Hey," You'll always have me as your friend, okay? No matter where you go." Emily nodded slowly, but her smile faded. "Promise?" "Promise," he whispered. Inside, Sister Mary watched from the doorway. She could see the pain in David's eyes. Later, when he came to her office, she spoke softly. "Mr. Miller, you care about her, don't you?" David sighed. "More than I should. But I don't know if I'm what she needs. I've lost too much already. I don't want to fail her." Sister Mary folded her hands. "Sometimes love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real." David looked at her unsure. She continued, "Emily doesn't want a rich man. She wants someone who shows up. Someone who listens. Someone who stays." Her words hit deep. He looked down at his hands, hands that once built companies, signed deals, changed lives, but never reached out to hold on to love when it mattered most. That evening, David went home and opened the drawer beside his bed. Inside was the drawing Emily had given him the first day they met. The man and the little girl holding hands. He stared at it for a long time, and something inside him broke open. He whispered, "Maybe this time I can be the dad she prayed for." The next morning, he called his lawyer. "I need help with an adoption," he said. "There's a little girl at St. Mary's orphanage." The lawyer hesitated. "Adoption can take time, sir. It's a long process." "I don't care how long it takes," David replied. "Start today." Over the next few days, David began the paperwork secretly. He didn't want Emily to know until he was sure. But life had other plans. One afternoon, when he visited the orphanage, he found Emily sitting quietly. Her crayons were untouched. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. She looked up with teary eyes. "The couple is coming tomorrow to take me home." David froze. Tomorrow? He wasn't ready. The papers weren't ready. His heart raced. "Emily," he said softly, "what if? What if there was another family who wanted you too?" She tilted her head. "Another one?" He nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Someone who loves you very much. Someone who wants to take care of you forever." "Oh." She smiled a little. "Like you?" David looked at her those innocent eyes, that brave smile, and said the words that had been sitting in his heart for weeks. Double quotes, "Yes, Emily, like me." Her face lit up with hope. But then she whispered, "But you don't have to." "I'll be okay," shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, Emily, you don't understand. I want to..." Tears filled his eyes, and Emily's small hand reached for his. "Then maybe," she said softly, "God did listen after all." But the next morning, when David arrived at the orphanage to speak with Sister Mary, Emily was gone. The couple had come early, and all that was left on her little bed was a drawing. A picture of a man standing alone under a cloudy sky, with the words written in small letters at the bottom, "Don't forget me, Mr. David." ***. The morning air was cold, but David's hands were shaking not from the weather, from panic. He rushed into the orphanage, calling out Emily's name, "Sister Mary." He shouted, his voice breaking. "Where is she? Where's Emily?" Sister Mary stepped forward, her eyes heavy with sadness. "The couple came earlier than planned. They didn't tell us in advance. They took her an hour ago." David's heart sank. "You let her go?" Tears filled the sister's eyes. "We had no choice. The papers were already signed." David turned away, his world spinning. The little girl who had brought light back into his life was gone, just like that. No goodbye. No chance to say what he truly felt. He walked out into the rain, his expensive suit drenched, his eyes filled with pain. For a man who had everything, he suddenly felt like he had nothing again. That night, David sat alone in his car, parked near the same church where it all began. The church bell rang softly in the distance. He stared at the cross, remembering her tiny voice whispering, "God, I just want a dad." He closed his eyes and whispered, "You gave me a reason to live again, and I lost it." His phone buzzed. It was his lawyer. "Mr. Miller, we have a small issue," the lawyer said. "The adoption papers you started for Emily, they weren't processed in time. But I found something strange. The couple who adopted her, they're not listed in the National Registry." David's head shot up. "What do you mean?" "They're not registered with the official adoption agency. Something feels off. David's heart started pounding. Send me their details. Now. Within minutes, he had their address. Without thinking twice, he got into his car and drove through the storm. After 2 hours, he reached a small, quiet town on the outskirts. The rain had slowed, but his heartbeat hadn't. He parked in front of an old house with peeling paint. The front gate creaked as he pushed it open. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, a man opened it, tall, rough-looking, with tired eyes. Yes, the man asked sharply. I'm looking for a little girl. Emily, David said firmly. You adopted her from St. Mary's orphanage? The man frowned. We don't want visitors. Go away, David didn't move. Where is she? At that moment, a soft voice came from inside. Mr. David. David's breath caught. Emily stood at the door, clutching her teddy bear. Her eyes widened, and then she ran forward, wrapping her small arms around him. Emily. He gasped, kneeling to hug her. Are you okay? She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I prayed you'd come. The man behind them looked angry. You can't just show up here. David stood tall, his voice calm but powerful. You have no legal papers. This adoption is invalid. I've already contacted the police. The man froze. Within minutes, a police car pulled up. David's lawyer had already informed them. The officers checked the files, confirming what David suspected. The couple had used fake documents. They were taken away quietly, and Emily was placed in David's care for temporary custody as they drove back through the night. Emily leaned against him, half asleep. Mr. David, she whispered softly, did God tell you to come? He smiled through his tears. Maybe he did. A week later, the court finalized the adoption, this time legally, properly, and with everyone's blessing. When the judge signed the papers, Emily looked up and asked, So now you're really my dad? David nodded, smiling through tears. Yes, sweetheart, forever. She jumped into his arms, laughing. The courtroom filled with claps, and Sister Mary wiped her eyes. That Sunday, returned to St. Mary's Church, the same place where it had all started. Emily knelt again, just like that first day, and whispered her prayer softly. Thank you, God, you listened. David stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. The sunlight through the glass window touched both of them, warm, bright, full of life, for the first time in years. David felt complete. He had lost everything once, but life, in its mysterious way, had brought him back the one thing he didn't even know he was still searching for. Emily. As they walked out of the church together, hand in hand, Emily looked up and said, Can we go get ice cream, Dad? David laughed, his voice light, his heart free. Of course we can. The church bell rang behind them, echoing through the streets, a sound not of sorrow this time, but of new beginnings. And somewhere above, the heavens smiled.